All right, so we're going to get started. This is a live webinar, so we'll be doing also do questions after this today, if anybody has any about this. Also, this is kind of a interesting topic. It's not. It's a topic that people wanted to hear. We had people vote on topics months ago, so I will present it. But next week, we're going to start doing some stuff that's a little bit more practical. We'll do next week. I want to do a webinar that's the resume review. So I try to do those at the beginning of each quarter. And next week will be the first meeting in April. So we'll do a resume review. I will send after this meeting. I'll send everyone who to send your resumes to, and then typically we strip people's names off, and we'll even change employer names and do some other things to make sure that your resume, that no one knows exactly, who you are as we're reviewing it. And people seem to like that. That's always a long webinar, and it has a lot of very useful information in it when you get to see your resume reviewed. So this webinar today is about the reasons why these high salaries are destroying the legal profession and creating problems. The reason I wrote this article and am doing this webinar is that every time there's an economic boom, what happens is salaries go up. And then when they go down, it creates, and when the law firms start laying people off, it tends to create a ton of problems. And then those problems, happen when you start getting into recessionary environments. I would say that even though there's still a lot of hiring and we're getting an awful lot of interviews, more than we've ever had in the past couple of weeks, the hiring, a lot of the hiring is actually taking place at smaller to mid-sized firms. So large law firms are a lot of them. We have a lot of people that we're working with that have been laid off, and not necessarily for performance reasons, but because of kind of the state of the economy. And I do see a lot of slowdown that will be coming in the near future. And I think it's probably going to get worse. I mean, there's just too much going on in the economy that makes that happen. So this webinar will talk a lot about salaries today, and really how the importance of salaries and a lot will go into quite a bit of detail. So what happens is, in the way that salaries kind of always have operated, is that the economy tends to be doing very well. And law firms are usually doing a lot of corporate related work. They're having a hard time holding on to corporate associates, and because corporate associates are going in house and doing other things, and then a firm will raise its salaries, and then lots of others will quickly follow. And when this happens, I mean, it becomes kind of the news. There's lots of news about raises, and everybody starts keeping track of which firms are the latest to raise salaries, hoping that their firms will be on the list if they're a large law firm. And then the largest and most successful law firms begin feeling a lot of pressure. Sometimes they'll actually call special meetings to raise salaries. And then in a short time, they and others will capitulate and start raising salaries. The same thing happens to smaller mid-sized firms. So they start feeling a lot of pressure to raise salaries. The differential between what a smaller to mid-sized firm is paying, or a regional firm, and large firms usually tends to become very large. And so when that becomes large, then the mid-sized firms also begin feeling a lot of pressure to raise their salaries, and it becomes harder for them to hold on to people in certain practice groups, especially things like corporate, different IP-related practice areas, and real estate. And then if the firms that don't raise their salaries begin to suffer from defections, law students, becomes harder for them to recruit people. And generally, they experience a weakening of the brands, difficulty getting offers accepted, people leaving, and their brands do suffer. I mean, it's something that I see in the market quite a bit for firms that don't do that. And so I think personally that these salary wars and what happens with them are fairly dangerous. They're very destructive. They and I'll tell you why. But they've ended a lot of careers. I mean, more than I can count. And they also harm people from even getting their career started in the first place. And to me, it's there's a lot of people that would have done much better under normal market conditions. But then when salaries start increasing, it does create a lot of problems. So this is actually, if you're, even though this doesn't sound like a topic that might benefit you if you're an attorney, this topic does, because it will show you kind of some of the warning signs and things you need to do, and how to kind of protect your career. And typically, drastic salary increases occur right before recessions. The market just gets overly enthusiastic. Things are going very well, and people and law firms start raising salaries. What happens because of this, and it's obviously happening now, is law firms, the increased salaries make the law firms start laying people off. So because they, in order to continue paying, it's difficult to pay people less once they've made more. So the law firms will start laying people off. The careers of partners, counsel, and others within the law firms become much less secure. And then the other thing that happens is a lot of people, when the salaries are high, and they hear about the salary increases and the demand for attorneys, they start going to law school. And so there becomes lots and lots of people going to law school that normally wouldn't go to law school. And then there's just a lot of tension between associates and partners. The law firms are more demanding for billable hours when the salaries increase, and so they're more concerned about getting hours out of people. There's less loyalty on both sides, less tolerance for training. Clients often will feel like they may be getting overbilled, or they don't know. And then also it tends to create a lot of turnover in the market. So, and that's what I'll talk about today. So the first thing is salary wars have no real connection to where the market demand in certain practice areas really is. They typically, the salary wars start when there's a war for the most talented corporate attorneys, and it's pretty much just corporate attorneys. And what happens is there's a lot of deals being done. There's often when there's recessions, what happens is there's not a lot of corporate attorneys coming in and trained, and so the few that are there when the economy is very good, especially at the mid-level, are very much in demand. And then law firms become very concerned about getting corporate attorneys because they have a lot of work for them, and so they start paying things like starting bonuses, and then a year, and then bonuses for corporate attorneys to keep them there. And then typically when the demand increases within 1 or 2 years, they start raising salaries. And this has been going on for decades. I mean, it started. I think someone told me about even a firm that's no longer in existence, Mudge Rowe, starting a salary war in the 1970s, and then they happened in the 1980s and the 1990s. So this pattern just continues repeating itself, and we're in one of these patterns right now. And the idea that the law firms are doing here is they want to, because they're so profitable doing all this corporate related work, regardless if it's capital markets or M&A, the law firms are doing whatever they can to keep the best associates around, to motivate them to work very hard, and then to protect them or prevent them if there's demand from going in-house or going to other firms. So other firms are obviously very hungry for good corporate attorneys. It's very difficult for mid-sized firms to hold on to their corporate attorneys when the economy gets very good, because they can be easily get jobs in larger firms that pay more. But it's also difficult for large firms to hold on to people because they can move to more prestigious firms, or they can also go in-house, and they have that option. So, but the first thing I'm saying is I'm talking about corporate attorneys. I'm not talking about that there's suddenly a dearth of litigators. There's always a lot of litigators out there. There's always many more litigators than there are jobs. But corporate attorneys are, the ones that are in demand. And corporate If you're not a corporate attorney, if you are a corporate attorney, it's an area of law that is different than litigation. It requires a certain type of mindset. This type of transactional work is typically the people that are good at it are people that are would be good at math and science and things like that. And people that are good at litigation are typically people that would be good at, things like, writing papers and English and things. And so there's just a different type of attorney that tends to do corporate. And they're people that be corporate attorneys often go to business school and they do well in business school. So it's a different type of mindset in the legal field. And it's an in-demand one. And people with these skills are very much in demand. You have to be very detail-oriented. You have to be able to think in a certain way. And then you also have to be able to work hard, interested in business. And then when the economy is very hot, corporate just reaches a fever pitch. I mean, there's just a lot of work that people need done when the economy is good. People are merging companies, they're starting new companies, and so corporate attorneys become very overworked and very busy. And law firms want to do whatever they can to keep them during good economies. And what's interesting when there are these salary wars is, and it didn't necessarily happen during the last salary war, but when they occur, there are often very few openings in other practice areas, which are like litigation, IP, real estate. The last boom there was, in the past couple of years, there was a lot of real estate work and other practice areas. But it doesn't matter. The salaries of these attorneys all increase as well. So even though the demand isn't necessarily there in other practice areas, the law firms are all increase their salaries. It's just in all practice areas, and it doesn't make a lot of sense that they would do that, but that's what they do. Even though the law of supply and demand is just one practice area, and then markets like Washington D.C. Washington, D.C. is an interesting market. What happens in Washington, D.C. is if you look at the firms there, they tend to have, mainly litigation-related people compared to corporate. If you look at the firms in New York, it's mainly, the big firms, it's mainly corporate. But the same thing happens in Washington, D.C. I mean, they participate in these salary booms and the practice areas like litigation, employment, they all their salaries all go up, and it doesn't make a lot of sense because the law firm is raising the salaries of everyone, and often the least productive and least busy people in the firm, and that's how it works. And it doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're a doctor, for example, and you want to make a lot of money, you might go into orthopedic surgery because that's where the money is. And if you want to be an attorney, make a lot of money, it stands to reason that you should choose a practice area where you make a lot of money if you join a large law firm, but it doesn't always work that way. I mean, law firms tend to pay everyone the same, regardless of their practice area. And, so it's just, it's just how it works. And it means that what happens is the rates of all the clients of the business, they all go up, the law firm, and regardless of the demand. And so, this is just kind of how it works. So, rates go up for everyone. And then, what a lot of law firms do when this happens, just so you can have a little bit of understanding, is sometimes they'll get rid of entire practice areas. Like, so employment law, and they'll often get rid of that when the economy gets really good, because the clients, unless they're doing class actions and things like that, the clients will, won't be willing to pay the billing rates that a lot of law firms have, and so that creates problems. And a lot of times, attorneys will lose their jobs in certain practice areas when the salary increase. And so it doesn't make sense a lot of times for them to have employment work. The same thing happens with other practice areas as well, like even patent to some extent, in large law firms. And so, law firms will often lay off people in practice areas where they can't afford to justify the salaries. And then a lot of times what they'll do is they'll rehire people and bring them on as staff attorneys. So they do that sometimes with employment. They do that with trademark. They do that with other practice areas when the salaries increase because the clients won't pay it. And so law firms actually, in order to become more competitive, they often need to let go people. And instead of just raising the salaries of the corporate attorneys and the people they're having a difficult time holding on to. And again, they're making a decision to increase their cost, the cost of doing business across the board for every type of associate. And the reason this is difficult and creates a lot of problems is that if you're in a slow practice area that's not in demand, it makes it very difficult for you to get a job, and so you're unable to get a job because of the law firm's increased cost of doing business, and it increases the cost of doing business for law firms that are dependent on corporate, and it makes them want to do more but less. And so what they do is they lay off associates to cover the increased cost of doing business. A lot of times, it also creates resentment in corporate departments. So what will happen is the corporate department will be bringing in a lot of the work and the money. And then because they're doing that and other departments aren't bringing in as much, a lot of times the law firms will also see a lot of their corporate people leaving. And then it gives attorneys in practice areas that aren't necessarily carrying their weight an over-exaggerated sense of their value, which becomes unsustainable in the market. So the idea is that the salary wars are increasing the cost of doing business for the very law firms who should not be increasing their cost of doing business. Again, there's nothing wrong with paying high salaries. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean, there's obviously some of these firms that pay these high salaries should pay them. They have very profitable institutional clients. They can get people to work very hard. They attack the best attorneys, and they have for generations. Really, what a lot of these law firms should do, I would argue, is that they should be, that there's nothing wrong with them paying salaries that are kind of in a separate universe. But what happens is, when law firms that can't afford to do this and pay the same salaries as someone like Cravath that's representing giant institutional clients that can write endless checks, that creates a lot of problems because those law firms, which are, again, a large proportion of the AmLaw 100 and 200 law firms, are never going to have the same level of blank check trust with their clients. And what I mean by that, just so you understand, is that if you're at a law firm, like some of these major law firms like Cravath or Wachtell or Sullivan and Cromwell, those law firms have clients that will pay them endlessly. Like they're almost, when I say blank check, I mean, they're not concerned about the cost as much. And something like Sullivan and Cromwell, for example, used to just send a bill with a number on it, not telling you the hours, but would produce it if you were asked. And a lot of the work that someone like Wachtell does is fixed fee and not in a percentage deal. And so most law firms that are raising salaries are really playing a game that they're not equipped to pay because they don't have the clients and enough clients that can support that. It's like, well, a lot of them, what they're doing is, they're paying these salaries and they're raising salaries, but they can't afford it. And so it does create a lot of problems. They're trying to keep up and they're trying to compete, but they're doing something that they probably shouldn't be doing. And that's always going to have adverse consequences in the future, meaning to the people that are working there. And because they're increasing the cost of doing business for law firms that really aren't dependent on corporate work at the same level for the majority of the revenue. And then doing this will actually make them less competitive in the marketplace. And eventually what happens is a lot of these law firms are setting themselves up to lay people off, which is scary. So if you're at one of these firms, you may be in that situation. It overextends law firms because their salaries don't have, always a connection to the market. And just because they're paying these salaries to keep up with a firm like Cravath, it's not. And they always say it's the Cravath scale because Cravath is often the first to raise salaries when the economy is doing very well. But again, most law firms out there are not Cravath. And so because they're not Cravath, they can't afford to raise their salaries at the same way. So what happens is salary wars pretty much always lead to mass layoffs and a lot of pain at most firms. Once they start raising salaries, pretty much you can be guaranteed that in short order, a lot of these law firms will let people go. It tends to happen a lot in Silicon Valley. It happens in New York. It happens in Chicago and other major markets, but it happens about every 8 years. There tends to be a recession or something bad that happens. The last one was in 2008 through maybe 11, and so sometimes it takes longer, but it happens about every 8 years. And the firms that can afford to pay these salaries, meaning Cravath, Wachtell, and Sullivan Cromwell. Sullivan Cromwell's laid off staff before, but I don't think attorneys. These firms don't lay people off. These firms that raise their salaries and that are the first to do so can easily afford to raise the salaries. It's not a big deal for them. They have institutional clients that are large and aren't going anywhere, and they're always going to be called upon, and they have plenty of work. But the majority of law firms really are not in the situation to do that, and will get themselves in serious trouble when they raise the salaries. And the reasons are pretty much, things I already talked about, which are salaries increased due to the demands in only one practice area, which is corporate. Corporate tends to move in tandem with the economy. So when the economy is active, corporate lawyers get very active at firms all over the prestige ladder. So they're getting small clients, larger clients, and people are doing a lot of corporate work. And then when the economy slows down, these law firms become very, very slow. And corporate will often get so bad during bad economies that you see corporate attorneys trying to become litigators, just as you see litigators trying to become corporate attorneys in good economies. And all the revenue that was coming in and all the demand for corporate attorneys when the economy was bad suddenly dries up and stops. It often stops instantly. I mean, people don't want to do deals in bad markets, and so the more heavily dependent a law firm is on corporate related work, the more the pain is, and so law firms start getting in panic mode when they see that all this revenue is coming in, and they start slashing people like crazy. The corporate market is often the first to slow down. A lot of major law firms in Silicon Valley, in New York, the second things slow down, they start laying off people en masse, and it's sad. I mean, it happens consistently. It's always happened, and when they happen, the layoffs are often rapid and quite extreme. Entire classes are often let go. Law firms may start deferring classes. They're already doing that, and that will happen. There's not only corporate attorneys, but then the law firm will use this as an excuse to clean house, and they'll let people go in slower practice areas, and the people that receive raises during those periods. So it could be in litigation, it could be in other practice areas. Sometimes they'll reorganize the firm and get rid of unprofitable practice areas. But this type of period, and we're in it right now, which is the reason for this webinar, is one of a lot of pain for attorneys. I mean, there becomes so few corporate jobs available that a lot of people will often leave the practice of law entirely when they're unable to find positions. There's also the case where a lot of law firms, to look strong, will have a lot of corporate openings, but they don't really have, there really aren't corporate openings there. Like they're posting them, and I don't know why, but they say they're corporate openings, but they really don't. And so, but what's so scary about this, and I just want everyone to understand, is that when it comes, like, it doesn't matter where you went to law school. It doesn't matter what your previous positions are. The market contracts, and it's brutal and severe. And I have strategies for getting people jobs during this. I mean, it's kind of what I live for, and I love. But it's not a good. And when I say brutal, I'm not exaggerating. I mean, I really do mean that. I mean, what happens is tens of thousands of attorneys all over the country who are one time, flying very high, often leave the practice of law, or find themselves working in jobs they never imagined they would have. I see these people all the time, and every day I see them, and I see them, lots of them every day, because they're in the market right now, and people become very scared. They're used to making a lot of money, and they're used to being in demand, and they're used to having headhunters call them all the time, and lots of options. And on the coast, a lot of times, these layoffs and recessions can create major problems. Meaning, what'll happen a lot of times is you literally could lose, over 75% of junior to mid-level corporate attorneys will be let go, together with a lot more people in many practice areas. And everyone is kind of cleaning house at the same time, meaning everyone is trying to find, is getting rid of people that they don't want as, or non-performers, or people that they feel that they could save money. And then people start leaving major cities, which are, a lot of times where a lot of the corporate work is happening is New York and the Bay Area. They'll start leaving these areas in droves. A lot of people end up getting divorced. I mean, it's sad, but I mean, they lose their self-esteem and other things when when they lose their jobs. A lot of people I've seen a lot of people get into deep holes and substance abuse and other problems, and it's serious. I bring this up because I see it, and most people, don't think this will happen to them, or when it is happening, they won't even, realize what's happening. And again, it's, most people don't think they'll get sick, for example, or have a heart attack or cancer or a stroke. And, but statistically, people do have these things happen to them. And I tell you this because I'm the one that, I see this and I see it every recession. And again, it's very scary, because everything that you've worked for, becoming an attorney, you may believe is going away, in your self-worth, the interest in you in the market, the everything, and it's bad, and it happens at all firms. And some of the things that I talk about and webinars are, each week are, the idea of, not getting too comfortable and working very hard when things are good, and not putting your interest ahead of your employer and all these things. And that's when push comes to shove, this is where these cycles will get rid of people that the law firms that may have bad attitudes, or have, been upset about the bonuses they've received in the past and stuff. And so law firms suddenly have an excuse to do it. And if you think all these layoffs that are happening at Amazon and Twitter and all these different companies and Facebook, this all affects law firms as well, because those are their clients, and those companies are laying people off because they are seeing a contraction in spending, and that hits law firms as well. So when it happens, you go from being, at the top of the world to feeling like you're unemployable. And when I say unemployable, it's because you want to make as much money as you were making before. It's not that you're unemployable. But what happens to a lot of people is when their salaries get very high, they start spending money on things. They may buy houses that are more expensive, or buy cars that are more expensive, or go out a lot, and that just doesn't necessarily happen to a lot of people. And so law firms, in an ideal world, you would think that they would put aside money and things and have an economic buffer. But when law firms do have, when things are going well, they often raise their salary and they spend money that they, shouldn't be spending. And so the other thing that happens is it makes the careers of partners, counsel, and others inside the law firm less secure as well. So every law firm has lots of dead weight. And what that means is it has assets and people that aren't as productive as the law firm would like, and meaning they can do better with harder working and more, whatever people that have business. And so the older the law firm, the more dead weight there is. And so there's partners that are able to survive for decades in some firms, meaning they could be in their 50s or 60s even, or their 40s, and they've been elevated to partner or counsel, and done so without any business. And sometimes they can weather multiple economic cycles. But usually what happens is when the gravy train of corporate work slows down, the law firm starts questioning everyone. So suddenly, someone that has not had any work but has been supported by the firm for decades, the law firm starts questioning every person and everybody in the firm, including older partners that may not be contributing as much, and they look for ways to save money. When Mark Zuckerberg said, like, 2023, I think he said, is the year of efficiency. Well, this is how law firms start thinking. So they start thinking, that they need to, just as they were, they raise salaries, law firms start thinking that they need to make layoff decisions. And the decisions are often short-sighted, and sometimes they're irrational. But what happens, a lot of these people that are especially older people will have, families, and they'll have children in college and other obligations and commitments they built up over a long period of time. If you're in a law firm right now, I'm sure you know of people, or you're one of them, that comes to this phase where the law firm doesn't believe that you're economically productive anymore and will start pushing you out, either slowly or quickly. People, their identities and their self-worth is often tied up with their jobs and working closely with a group of people. It's their identity, the people that they trusted. But when the economy slows down, like it is now, a lot of this stuff will come crashing down. And the value that these partners offered people, or people that protected them, or they gave them work, when everything is being questioned and the law firm's looking for money, it suddenly begins laying people off. Now, and laying senior partners and other people off that don't have a lot of business. Everyone suddenly becomes questioned. Even the idea of a new associate, or a summer associates are questioned, and that, well, everyone's trying to save money. And it's hard to believe that a salary increase could cause this sort of mayhem, but it does. I mean, what it's doing is it's creating a cost structure that makes it much more expensive for the law firm to operate, and that affects everyone up and down the chain, including partners that don't have business, or without a lot of business, and then it also affects a lot of people inside the law firm, and because the law firm needs to pay these junior associates so much, it will often give them a lot of work, many times over senior attorneys. because because they're cheaper, and it looks better for clients if they're trying to save them money in a bad economy. And then one of the other things that I don't like is that when this happens, the law firms will have very little tolerance for on-the-job learning and mentoring of junior associates when they're paying very high salaries. So, it's important to understand that, if you're a new associate in a firm, most associates really aren't competent to do deals or fully represent a client until they have several years of experience. It could be, in the corporate realm. I mean, it takes at least 2 or 3 years to know your way around, and depending on how much work you get. And so law firms often will write off a lot of the hours of a junior associate because they're learning on the job and not necessarily as efficient as they should be with their time when they don't like to, and some firms don't, but a lot of them do. And but what happens when the salaries of these junior associates rise, the law firms will have a lot less tolerance for learning on the job, and a lot more impatience, and they expect junior associates to get up to speed very, very quickly, and they realize how much money they're paying them, and because they're paying them so much money, often the reviews will become much harsher, especially when things slow down, and then the law firms will start expecting even more hours out of their associates to make them profitable, and then and junior associates, whether it's direct or indirect, start getting the message that they have to start billing even more extreme hours than they were before in order to stay employed. And a lot of attorneys learn very early in their careers that the quality of the reviews are more important, are often related to not to the quality of the work, but how many hours. And so, again, this is, not really, that important, but the amount of money that a junior associate's paid really is not something where the law firm usually is going to make a lot of money. Most law firms start making money off you if you're an associate when you're a mid-level associate. And what's crazy about it is because you're joining a firm, as a junior associate. Most law firms, most people leave when they're a mid-level. And so the law firms are a lot of times, wasting their money. And there are firms out there that don't like this game and only hire laterally, because most of the people that the law firm's training as a junior associate are going to leave, and so law firms realize that, and they put a lot of pressure on them early in their careers, and a lot of times because they don't feel welcome, they don't feel tolerated, they don't feel like they feel like they're expected to work a lot of hours. The law firm's a lot of the partners may not be that nice to them because the law firm feels they're going to leave. They don't know if they're loyal or not, because most people end up leaving by the time they're mid-levels. And so this creates a lot of pressure for the law firms, and it creates a lot of pressure for the junior associates because it gives them a profound, distaste for the practice of law, which many people have. And it becomes more of an endurance game where people are expected to give it their all to justify their existence, and there's a lot of pressure on them. And again, this is it kind of talks about how difficult it can be psychologically to provide value to the law firm when you have this much pressure. You're expected to bill incredible hours, and literally, you might have had a better life 500 years ago as a serf, working on a farm, because at least you'd go home at night. And here, you're often not allowed to go home. I know, just to give you sense of it and how demanding this is, the ability to stay employed and being part of the system that's paying you all this money, where you're having these very high expectations. The people that have worked that work in major law firms and really commit to it. I mean, a lot of times, especially the larger the law firm, will often have very significant like health and psychological problems. By their mid 40s. I mean, it's a very difficult job, and survival becomes very difficult when the law firm's putting all this pressure on you related to justifying your salary, and then people never get that comfortable. I mean, it's very difficult to feel comfortable and ultimately secure in a firm when that things are going to change. I mean, I'm sure everyone has had the dream where I used to have them when I was in school about being in a class and not studying for an exam or knowing about the class until the last day or week or something. That's a famous dream. But the other famous dream that people have is when they're woken up, they haven't billed any hours in a few weeks. And so the struggle to bill hours, it creates an atmosphere where there's just not a lot of loyalty on both sides. And people are very nervous. And there's essentially zero assurances. And the higher the salaries go, the more accountable you have to be for your hours, and the more stress there is in your firm. And I make this point every webinar, and I'll make it again. I know people that join smaller to mid-sized firms a lot of times out of law school or go there after 1 or 2 years end up staying in the practice of law, where a lot of people, where you're chasing the salaries, don't stick with it and probably make less money in the long run, probably have a less satisfying career in the long run than the people that are turned away by this. And, when people are leaving, I talked to someone yesterday that I hired for a recruiter job that had been practicing for, 25 plus years and was wanting to leave because of all the pressure of the hours and things. So it never goes away. As you get more senior, it's there, and people are, it's a very, very difficult job. And so what happens, the other thing that happens is when salaries start increasing, and this may not concern anyone on the call, but law schools start enrolling a lot more future attorneys. And because people will go to law school knowing that there's these incredible salaries waiting for them if they go to a good law school and do well. And so a lot of people enroll in law school for no other reason than they know that they can make a lot of money in the profession and graduate into the upper middle class very quickly. And so a lot of people will go to law schools in order to do it, and even in the bad economies, and if you go to a top 10 law school, the majority of people can get jobs in good firms, but at the same time that legal recessions hit, typically what happens is the enrollment has peaked. And so during slow times, a lot of people don't go to law school, but then when there's recessions, when the economy is very good, people start going to law school. And so, and then what happens is people will come out of law school and, again, a top 10 school, if you do okay, you can certainly find a position, but at a lot of other schools, you can't. And so you kind of come out of school and you graduate into a career that's just hostile and unwelcoming. It's not, people are not nice to you looking for a job unless it's a job that's, that you may not want. And it becomes very scary. I mean, people are coming out of school and they don't understand why no one's interviewing them, why no one's interested in hiring them. They thought they were getting into a career with these high salaries. And so what happens is a lot of people that may have come out of a top 25 law school and gotten a good job during a good economy will come out and find themselves working as solo practitioners or contract attorneys and in jobs they do not enjoy, or doing document review and things, and will graduate into becoming second-class or third-class citizens in a profession that is just not welcoming them, because the opportunities that might have been there when they went into law school aren't there anymore. And the bar becomes higher for getting a job as a summer associate and to getting things. And so people are coming out, and it's just kind of luck of the draw. But the law firms are letting people go. They have fewer needs for summer associates, and it's just very sad. And every day I meet people that I think would have been very successful had they been in other professions, and it's something really to think about, because if you're in a profession that's not welcoming to you, that you don't see the opportunity that you can have, that's scary. And I meet people every day that I know would be good salespeople, or have really good musicians, or do something, and then go to law school for some reason, and then they come out and they emerge on the other side after doing this with no job or prospects, and they may have gone to law school for the wrong reasons. They may have gone because they thought the salaries were really high, or that it sounded like an interesting profession, and they don't really realize what it is or how hostile the profession can be. I mean, some of these law firms are very difficult to get into, and they will, they're not nice, and it doesn't feel nice when the law firm isn't interested in you, and so just because a profession looks hot in the eyes of the public doesn't mean that it's the right choice for you a lot of times, and again, I review resumes all day, every day. I wish I had more time to do it, because I love it doing it. And I would say that most resumes that I review, not all of them, meaning more than 50%, I think would probably have done better channeling their energies into something else than law school a lot of times now. But at the same time, I'm surprised every day by people. I mean, and by if this is something you really want to do, and that I've seen some incredible success stories of people that have just done amazing things. I interviewed someone yesterday that graduated from law school and couldn't get a job, spent the first 10 years as a solo practitioner, and then incredibly, through a recruiter, got a position in a AmLaw 50 law firm as a 10th year attorney, and then stayed there for 10 years. Then went in-house and got another job with. So some people can really, do great things, and it's a lot of your human spirit. But feeling unwelcome by law firms is very hard for people, and the debt that people take on pursuit of a profession that doesn't want them is staggering. You're very welcome when you're going to law school, because law schools love your tuition money, and banks loan you money, and it can be a very good profession for a lot of people. One thing I just want to say to everyone, because I know this sounds a little discouraging in terms of coming out of law school and not being welcome. Most attorneys have to apply to a lot of places to get interviews. It's just how it is. Now, if you're in a great practice here and you're like 2 or 3 years out, you may find the kind of everything very welcoming, but it's difficult. I mean, you have to, because you're basically, when you're looking for a job, you need to find someone that's looking for someone exactly like you, and has a need, meaning they have the business to pay you. And so the larger law firms are often very difficult to get into, because they need to have large clients paying them, and then when there's recessions, they can slow down. And so you just need to realize that even though the profession isn't welcoming, anybody that applies to a lot of places always gets a job, even in the worst economies. It's just people don't believe they should have to, and it's unfortunate that there's that belief, because it does create a lot of problems. And then because there's so much money that new positions are paying, a lot of people will go to law school for financial reasons, and not because they have any interest in practicing law. They realize when they're in college, I realized this, that if I did well in college and did well in the LSATs, I could go to a good law school and make a good living. This is what a lot of people do. They just decide that it's something they want to do. Now, some people, a lot of them, go to law school not because they want to be in a firm, but because they really want to do something like be a judge or things, and that's good. But a lot of people do enter the practice of law for the wrong reasons, and going to law school for money is really, in my opinion, not a smart thing to do. There are attorneys that do that, and you certainly can earn a very good living as an attorney. But in reality, being a lawyer is really is a more of an academic type profession. It's a profession where your job is to look out for others' interest, and it doesn't matter who that person is. It could be an individual, a corporation, or group, but it's really your job is to help other people essentially, and have an instinct that you want to help other people, and then hope you get as much money as you can for that. But it's really to help other people. And the more you do that, the more you're dedicated to that, the more you see the world that way, and you try to provide value, typically the better you'll do. And that's just how it works. The attorneys that I know that are focused on money and getting the best deal they can from everybody and that sort of thing, typically they're in a universe and they stay there, and they never really rise. The people that go the farthest in this profession are people that really take a profound interest in their subject matter and whatever their practice area is. And then they're very concerned about helping other people, whoever they are. And people hire them because they're like that. And that's what it is. It's not, the job of being an attorney is not to sit there and count your pennies and try to, make as much money as you possibly can on each employer. The more you're dedicated to others, the better you'll do. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that. And it's something I've seen forever. The people that are most interested in their clients, the people that are the most interested in helping others, the people that want to represent people that almost would do it for free if they could, those are the best people in any profession, and the law is one of them. And if you are interested in the practice of law and you have an affinity for it, you should be interested and concerned with solving the problems of others. You should think about them a lot. You should not be concerned necessarily with your wealth or your own prestige. Attorneys that are that way typically get into trouble. And I don't want to tell you all the stories, but there's the more you're concerned about how much money you make, your bonuses, and less concerned with doing a good job with your clients, then the better off you're going to be if you're able to get on the side of your clients and what you're doing. And your clients, by the way, when you're a junior associate, are the partners you're working for, and really thinking about what you can do to help them. And that's just kind of how it is. And so if you're fit for the practice of law, you generally are going to have an interest in taking the side of someone who's your client and doing everything you can to make sure that client gets the most benefit from working with you. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to make money, but if that becomes your prime motivating factor, then you're actually in trouble, because it's going to come across to everyone, and you'll start making all your decisions based on that, as opposed to helping your clients so you need to be very careful about making the highest salary you can get and everything, the calculus of what you do. I mean, it's very dangerous. In the 1950s, people didn't go to law school for financial reasons. They went to law school because the profession appealed to them. It changed largely due to Cravath, that started kind of institutionalizing and creating a large law firm and things. But But when money becomes a motivating factor for what you're doing, there's other types of professions that might be better suited for you. And again, I'm not saying that the law, you can't make a lot of money, because you can, and you should if you're fit for it. But if that's your reason for it, then law may not be the best fit for you. And because if people are only in the law firm because they're trying to make money, and law firms realize that a lot of people will go to them because they pay the highest salaries and things, if law firms are able to attract those sort of people, then the law firm knows that in return for the money, the people will work incredible hours. And then if you're working for a law firm that's also very concerned about money, they'll start cutting people dramatically at the first sign of a downturn. And you're kind of treated more like a commodity than something else. And that's what's, scary. So law firms, by the way, just as they pay high salaries, law firms evaluate each other based on how many are based on the salaries of the partners. So law firms are also trying to give very high salaries to the partners because their prestige level in the eyes of other attorneys and their peer firms is also based on that. So the partner compensation is a whole other calculus, but you're either a cost center or a profit center, and what happens is as cost centers are cut and profit centers are exploited to the maximum they can. Meaning they try to make money. And again, a lot of people, like what I do is obviously move partners from different firms with a lot of business from firm to firm. But really, just so you understand kind of how exploitation works, partners are actually very exploited and with a lot of business because law firms will try to get as much of that profit for themselves than the money that they pay the partner. And they'll justify that in all sorts of ways. They'll pay the partner as little as they can. And often it'll force the partners to leave, a lot of times a partner will be told, and they make promises to partners and compensation, and then when things slow down, they renege on them, and it's just even with more business sometimes, and so law firms often feel, or partners often feel very taken advantage of in firms, and many times there's people that will move every couple of years. I mean, literally every 4 or 5 years, because they'll do well, and then the law firm will mess with their compensation. And most large law firms, because of the pressures they're under to maintain their brands in the eyes of the public, meaning and law students, will pay high salaries, and then also try to have their partners paid the most. And, but I believe if you're, concerned about your compensation, and that's really where you're at, you're going to be really unhappy. You should, I would hope, and I don't know, I know that most people don't do this, but you would want to be in a place where you feel safe, and where people have your back, and where you're being trained, and where there's a runway to succeed in the long run, and not necessarily a runway to leave. But those are decisions that you need to make. I see a lot of people that make the wrong decisions about this. And then what happens that when people do go to these massive firms, a lot of times with very high compensation, they get really what I would say a false sense of their worth. You might call it like the spoiled rich child syndrome. And it may often take decades for them to overcome. There's a lot of people, like that you can see, one-hit performer, professional athletes, or, people that, musicians that had one-hit wonders and that sort of thing, that are often, let down, and often spend decades trying to recover from their initial stardom, and trying to recapture their lost glory and so forth. And often what happens if you take a job at a law firm and you're working in a law firm that pays a lot of money, it may often be the most money you ever make. And that actually happens for a lot of attorneys. Their starting salary at a major law firm is more than they'll ever make. And then when after they've done that for a few years, and then they try to move to other firms, and if there's not other jobs in large law firms for people like them, then they'll often find that their true market value is not really the same as it was when they were younger. And then it's very taxing. I mean, a lot of times they'll feel like they failed. A lot of times people will, rather than take a lower salary, will take jobs that they don't, that they'll leave the practice of law sometimes, or they'll take jobs that they don't feel are good. It's very common for people in a lot of major markets, once they see that the market's not going to be as welcoming to them, or they won't be able to make as much money, they'll drop out of the practice of law after a few years in major law firms, and so it can create a false need, a false sense of expectations, and people, and a belief that they're entitled to something, and in a lot of cases, what's happening is, getting into law school, getting a position, and so forth, isn't the same as having the long-term work ethic and perseverance to succeed inside a law firm, which is the kind of stuff I teach. And listening to this kind of stuff is very useful. But when you come out of law school, you really don't have a lot to offer. You haven't demonstrated that you're loyal, and as a junior associate, you're often not profitable. You're often not committed to practicing law in the long run, or your practice area, and in a lot of cases, it's your first job. So what happens is the market realities will catch up with attorneys, and so they leave, and they expect the market to pay them the same amount they were making relative to everything working out. And so it was funny, I was looking at a bunch of candidates yesterday and today, and people that have been laid off from, there's a lot of firms that have laid off people, and some of them were in practice areas like crypto and things, and was saying that they wanted $300,000 minimum, but they've been out of work for 2 or 3 months, and that's a practice area that I don't think is going to be doing well in the long run. So a lot of times, but people still believe that their sense of worth is based on what a law firm may have paid them, and that they've may have earned the right to practice at that level with firms that pay that much, and yet they you may not be in a position to make that much money, and a firm, or even have and you have a sense of entitlement that comes from having gotten a very good job early in your career. I guess you could call it the spoiled child syndrome. It's not, again, I came out of this large law firm environment, so I'm not being critical of people, but it's the idea that you get paid a lot of money when you're very young, and you feel like you're very special, and then they. And that's kind of how that works. And so this is just talking about, the spoiled child syndrome and kind of how that works. But when a law firm pays an attorney more than they're worth, the law firm is often doing that because it's trying to prove something to other firms that it's part of that group. I have, it's funny. I deal with. I was dealing with a law firm that was trying to, I don't know, they were basically trying to rip me off the other day. And and they were bragging about how much they were paying their associates, and that's a source of pride. And it was a small law firm in a small town. It wasn't, but they were, law firms are very proud when they pay people a lot of money, and they believe, that they should, and and they're very proud of it, and. So it's, I see lots of people get into these firms where they may make, very large initial salaries, and then they expect, once they decide to leave, or once the law firm lets them go, or once they decide they want to look for a job, that whatever they're getting paid is what they're worth in the market. And that becomes very, very difficult for them. And so what happens is, the single largest reason, by the way, every day we get lots of interviews at BCG. Sometimes attorneys don't go on interviews when we get them, even though they accepted them, and they don't get them because they don't go on interviews because the firms aren't paying as much as wherever they are. So they refuse to work a lot of times for much less money than they might have been making in the large law firms, and then if they do accept the job, then they act like they don't need to work as hard as they are in a large law firm, and they may not commit to the next position, or be kind of angry about the next position because it doesn't pay as much. And so what I'd like to encourage you to the way to think about this is, if you're trying to get a position in a firm, and you've left a large law firm, or you're leaving a large law firm, and you think you're worth a certain amount, you may be, but just remember that a lot of these salaries are artificially high, and you're really, the most important thing you can do is to have access to work on an ongoing basis, and not just have access to work, but go to a place that's safe. And if a law firm's being propped up artificially economically by one practice area and so forth, it may not be safe. And so this is a lot of times, the other thing that law firms will do with the higher salaries is they'll pay senior associates a lot less money than they need to, and a lot of attorneys are very good. So law firms can tell, and attorneys can tell very quickly who's very good and who's not. And in an ideal market economy, if you were a very good associate, you would be paid a lot more compared to your peers. But again, this doesn't necessarily matters. As an attorney gets more senior, a lot of times they're only paid a small amount more than junior attorneys, who really have no idea what they're doing, and are more likely to leave and get fired, or not even be practicing law. Law firms generally start making money after on your work, and you become very profitable after you've been practicing for around 3 years. And this is really, in my opinion, when the salaries should start getting high. So in a normal functioning economy, the people that are going to be very good mid-levels, if you were to get through your first couple of years of practice and do well, then it would be almost appropriate for your salary to, I would even say, double or something compared to what it was for a junior associate. Junior associates, because you're learning how to practice, it's more of an apprenticeship. It doesn't make sense to pay them as much as they do, once you learn what you're doing, I think the salary should be much higher, and there would be more commitment. There'd be more on-the-job learning, and the people that were able to do well would do much better. And this is what happens with doctors, for example. Doctors do residencies, and then when they become competent, or they do fellowships, after they get that and became doctors, they're paid a lot. So they have a huge salary increase after they've learned what they're doing. And then, it's even in what happens is kind of funny in smaller cities and a lot less profitable law firms. What happens is the associates are there's kind of another way that works. So the law firms will often pay market salaries for the people in their first year, but then, or even sometimes it'll go up the second year, but then they may increase the salaries very slowly of people after that. So the best and most profitable associates, then senior associates, are often paid a little bit less than they're worth. They have high starting salaries, but then they don't pay them a lot of money in the long run, as much money as it would be valued at. And then one of the things that I've noticed a lot of is that sometimes there are law firms that pay their non-equity partners and counsels less than they would pay a first-year associate, if you can believe it. And it's just because that's just how it works. It happens, and I've seen it in some of the 200 largest law firms. And when I tell people this, a lot of times they don't believe me. But it's something that I have seen frequently. Again, people don't like it. And then the next thing is raising salaries. I'm almost done, and then we'll take questions. It doesn't really fix anything, and a lot of times, they're raised for no reason whatsoever. This is in 2000. This was kind of the first big salary increase. Everything was, people were making about 85,000 starting salary. Then a firm called Gunderson raised salaries, and people, that particular firm did it because people were going in house, and there was a dot-com boom going on, and all the venture capital money was being poured into these companies, and a lot of people were becoming very rich at leaving places like Gunderson and so going to dot-com companies. And so Gunderson raised salaries. It was a very unique issue that they raised salaries for. It had a problem. It was in the kind of the epicenter of this whole thing. It was and there was and it had to do something. And but all of a sudden, firms in New York City, Texas, and Los Angeles, and other Bay Area firms started raising their salaries once Gunderson did, which kind of was odd because they didn't have the same problems that Gunderson had. And then these salary wars just kind of keep happening. And each time it's happened, there's been no reason for it, really. I mean, Korath has never suffered from mass defections. It raises salaries and things are going well. But a lot of times it's not necessarily inflation driving it. And it doesn't necessarily solve anything. It often actually makes things worse. So just in kind of conclusion, if you and again, I keep emphasizing this factor, but the salaries and your expectations and things for a salary can be very difficult and create long-term problems in your career. If you start your career at a smaller law firm that doesn't pay anywhere near the salaries of a large law firm, you're often going to be practicing law 10 or 20 years out. And this is just how it works. I don't know why it is, but I think that if you join a more supportive environment, many times you're likely to be nourished, grow, and at a reasonable pace and pay scale, and not feel as much pressure. And again, there's nothing wrong with large law firms paying massive salaries. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is when when it creates conditions that aren't good for you, that's creating problems. And generally, attorneys that leave the practice of law more attorneys leave after having been in large law firms many times than starting out at mid-sized to smaller law firms that pay less. And one of the ways that I think about it is if you are at a large law firm or considering starting a large law firm, a lot of what you're doing is you're front loading a lot of your compensation at the beginning of your career. And by front loading, I mean, you're going to get a high salary. You're probably going to not, unless you're good at what you do and you're enthusiastic and you kind of follow the rules about getting very interested in your clients and meeting people and things. If you do that, you're not front loading the compensation, but a lot of people do front load their compensation. So you'll get the most money you ever get, when you're not ready for it and you haven't earned it, and then you have it all taken away. And that's can be scary. And regardless of where you may have gone to law school, I mean, most attorneys that start out at large law firms do have their compensation often front loaded into their first jobs, and then people are always interested in salaries forever. There's always been online message boards and things where people are very concerned about the salaries they're making. Law students have always been very interested in salaries that they're going to making, very excited, and can't believe how much money they're going to make. And people become very proud when salaries are raised, and parents become proud and happy. But a lot of times, that's misplaced. The owners of the law firms don't like raising salaries, and a lot of times it does make them angry. They look at you. They'll look at you differently as a cost center. They'll often have to pass this on, and then they'll obviously have passed on the billing to clients, but they will often, again, senior associates will often get pushed out and gets less work. And then the higher salaries will, create kind of an issue of inhumane hours and things inside of a law firm that, creates the problems of working in a big law to begin with. So that's the webinar. I will take a quick break, and then this is a live webinar. So any questions that you have, I will be happy to answer. All right, so let me go to questions. Just give me 1 second here. Pull this up. Okay, let me see. Yeah, so anybody that has questions. There's not a lot of questions for some reason, but but I'm going to answer the first one here. How do these trends affect litigation associates? Okay, well, this is a good question. So one of the things that happens during recessions, which is actually nice, is a lot of times the number of lawsuits out there will increase. And so typically law firms will switch from relying on corporate related work to relying more on litigation, because litigation tends to pick up when things slow down, because people are often suing for things that went wrong during a better economy, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of how it affects litigation associates. So litigation often becomes more in demand during recessions, and law firms will often be doing a lot more hiring of litigators than they would when the economy is good. And when the economy is good, fewer people are suing and upset about bad deals. And then when the economy goes bad, people will remember people that owe them money and that sort of thing. And so litigation will often increase. What does happen, though, I think that when salaries increase, a lot of times is if there's not a lot of work in large law firms for litigators and more corporate, then they tend to be more likely to let litigation associates go, and it can create more issues there. There's also another thing that's kind of interesting with litigators compared to other practice areas. As a corporate associate gets more senior, a lot of times they experience like less pushback and pressure to leave than in large law firms than litigators often experience. So litigators becomes a little bit harder many times for law firms to pay senior litigation associates. They're less in demand than senior corporate attorneys. So senior corporate attorneys, if you're a senior corporate attorney with a law firm, there's usually things out there for you, much more so than a senior litigation associate. Okay, so this question is from a candidate. Let's see here. How often does BCG have applied to opportunities and would love to work with someone at BCG? Thinks I'm a candidate for. So typically, like, and we have, it's not like in terms of the people that we represent at BCG, we do it in a bunch of different ways, but most people most recruiters will kind of look at candidates in a couple different ways. Most recruiters look at are only interested if you're at a big firm or you worked in your big law school or you're an attorney with business. That's kind of the traditional model of how recruiters look at people. But really, the way they should be looking at people and the way we look at people is talking about or is more related to what your expertise is and then your pattern of expertise. So anybody, and we'll talk about this next week, and I'm actually pretty excited to do resume reviews next week. But a pattern of expertise on your resume is really what makes everyone expertise. Sorry, I'm not spelling that right. Pattern of expertise makes you marketable. So what that means is, whatever you're doing, if you're doing corporate, like your resume should just talk about corporate. It shouldn't talk about if your previous job was litigation or whatever. And so the pattern of expertise makes you marketable. So that means, preferably working in a law firm, and then preferably, in a law firm, and then preferably doing one practice area. So when you do one practice area, I don't know why I'm spelling preferably wrong. I took some cold medicine, geez, it's not good. It's, preferably in one practice area. So what that means is, if you're corporate, your resume should look all corporate. If you're litigation, you should look all litigation. And so the mistake that people make that makes them not marketable, at least to BCG, and this is what we need to look for, is making your resume kind of look like you do a bunch of different things. Because law firms always want to hire people that have expertise in something, and so they like it when you do one thing. And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be like some of the most marketable attorneys are people like family law attorneys or trust and estate attorneys or even criminal attorneys, because they're doing one thing. And a lot of times people that get in trouble, it might be someone that's like an environmental attorney, but also a commercial litigator and also does some trademark work. Then law firms, it just doesn't look like you're as committed to one thing when your resume is kind of bouncing all over like that. So law firms want to see a pattern of expertise. And that's one reason also why a lot of times when people come out of a big law firm, they're doing one thing. And that's what makes them marketable, and that makes them marketable to smaller firms. But most law firms want to see people that are experts in things. And so regardless of the law firm, whether it's a small law firm or a large law firm, when you're an expert, you get more interviews. And so if you're a corporate attorney, I would say, and if I was looking at your resume, if I saw something that everything was about corporate, then I would be excited, because that's what law firms want. It doesn't matter where you went to law school. It doesn't matter how big your firm is. It just matters if you have that focus. And that's really, in my opinion, one of the most important things about, being able to get positions is to have a focused resume. And it's something I could talk about it all day. I will talk about it all day next week when we do this. And I hope you give us your resume, but having that focus is makes you marketable. As long as someone has focus on their resume, I'll always work with them, and because there's always jobs for people to focus, and typically in a law firm as well. If you've been working in-house and have run into associate salaries so high that you don't want to deal with associates because you just go to law firms for very specific questions, companies can no longer afford the general work. Well, in my next position, I will not use a big firm. The prices have increased and the quality is severely decreased. Interesting. Do you see this happening as well? Are law firms doing anything about it? This is great. I very much appreciate this question. This is a very good question. So if anybody has more questions, I would appreciate them. These are, I always love questions. So yes, so the problem with associates, especially at a lot of large law firms, is that they're under a lot of pressure to bill hours. And so once you give them something, a lot of times they will run with it. And because they want to bill hours. The other thing a lot of times is the law firms will use the relationships to encourage you to have them do work, and so you do have to be very careful as well. It was funny. I'll just tell you a quick story. I was talking to a guy that owns a pretty good sized company, and he was he hired an in-house franchising attorney to work for him, and when he hired the in-house franchising attorney, he had to pay the in-house franchising attorney, I think, like $300,000 a year, and then he also his bills from the law firm increased as well, because the franchising attorney was giving more work and found out other things that needed to be done to give to the law firm that they came from. So a lot of times, in-house people run into that as well when they hire associates. Now, talking about the quality decreasing, I don't know why that would happen. I sense that a lot of it is about a lot of law firms not requiring people to go into the office, a lot fewer face-to-face interactions and things. I wasn't aware about the quality decreasing, and it may just be at certain firms, but I think anytime the market gets overheated and there's a lot of people there's coming into the market and the law firms need people, I think the quality of the work can definitely decrease to a great extent. Okay, well, it doesn't look like I have a lot more questions. Usually there's a lot more questions in this. In terms of next week, I will send around something for emails and things, so you guys can, girls can present your resumes. I do feel like it's very helpful to do the resume reviews, and I do them once per quarter. And what I do talk about when I look at resumes is always trying to have really show a good pattern of expertise, and making sure that you look consistent in terms of what you're doing is really, I think, probably the biggest thing. Here's another question. Thanks. Yeah, and anybody has questions, I will answer them. If anyone, here's another question. Let's see here. Building on my last question, my prior firm, I would push back on certain items on invoices from law firms where a mid-level associate was completing low-risk due diligence work that a junior associate could do, and vice versa from a quality perspective. Yeah, so I mean, what happens a lot of times is, most law firms, by the way, when you push back on their invoices, a lot of them will bargain with you. I would say, it's most law firms will bargain with you and reduce the rates if you're pushing back. But you shouldn't feel like you need to do that. So if you feel like you need to do that, a lot of times you may be better with another firm. One of the things I would tell you, just as someone who's working in-house, is that a lot of times what happens is the law firms market themselves as being cheaper or having better expertise that saves you money. And that's really a lot of times how law firms come onto the scene and get popular, is by having some sort of way that they market themselves or things that they say about themselves that makes them look cheaper. But in reality, it's kind of, most of the time, is all the same thing. They're all the same type of firm. And I mean, they all kind of build a certain way. Someone asked, do you have or see any changes to the upcoming law firm service structure? I don't see anything really changing. I think that that to the extent that the law firm clients are able to force changes in the market, but I don't really see anything changing. I think it's always going to kind of work the way it does. One of the things that is interesting is there's certain practice areas like patent prosecution or trademark or some other things that are very difficult for large law firms to, because of the commodity nature of the billing structure, that are very difficult for law firms to make money from. So if it, for example, filing a trademark at a may cost a few $1,000s, but if a law firm has to bill by the hour, that will charge more than that would cost. A lot of people in the market will do things like patents at a fixed fee. Sometimes law firms will go on retainer as outside employment counsel, and so things that large law firms can't do, other people will step in and do it a different way. In terms of the way the service structure works, though, I mean, the best lawyers are always going to be in demand, and so and we'll be able to charge high billing rates and so forth, kind of the way they've always been doing. Okay, well, thank you for all the questions. Next week should be a lot more interesting than this. I wasn't too excited to do this webinar today. I've had a lot of people ask for it. I'm assuming it was firms, so I did it, but I do like doing much more exciting type webinars, and I am excited for next week, which will be the webinar about where we'll review resumes. So anybody that's watching today, I mean, I'd love to review your resume for you. We'll remove your name, we'll change your current employer, and so no one will know who you are. And we've always modify the resumes beforehand. It's something I do once a quarter, and I love doing it. So I'm excited for that next week, and certainly appreciate everyone being on this today. And thank you.